I stood alone in the quiet of my living room, coffee growing cold in my hand, as I stared at the card propped neatly on the mantel. No handwriting on the envelope. No return address. Just a bland floral print and one sentence inside. Thanks for the DNA. No love. No name. No acknowledgement of the years I gave up sleep, dreams, or dignity to raise a son who now treats me like a genetic footnote. On Mother's Day, the day meant to honor everything I ever gave, I was reminded just how forgettable I'd become. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. I woke up to quiet, not the comforting kind, the kind that felt like something had gone missing. The house still held that early morning chill, filtered light leaking through the blinds. It was Mother's Day, technically, though I didn't expect anything. Evan hadn't called in years. Naomi usually sent flowers, like she was checking off a box. But when I walked into the living room, there it was, a card, propped up dead center on the mantel like it had been measured into place. I stared at it a long time before picking it up. The front was one of those bland floral designs, could have been for a birthday or a retirement party. It said, "Thinking of you today." I opened it. Inside, scrawled in ink too dark and deliberate to be casual. Thanks for the DNA. No. Love, Evan. No signature. Just that. Neat. Clean. Final. My fingers curled around the edge of the card like I might tear it in half. But I didn't. I just stood there, holding it, hearing the silence thicken around me. The dishwasher hadn't been emptied. The dog across the street was barking again, the one with the limp. I looked down and realized I hadn't even put on socks. The card landed back on the mantel with a soft tap. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Naomi. I pressed play without thinking, and her voice filled the room, flat, unreadable, like she was reciting something off a script. Hi, Mom. Just hope you're having a restful day. We'll call later. Or tomorrow. Okay. Bye. No, I love you. Not even Happy Mother's Day. Just restful. Like I was an invalid. Like they'd both quietly decided I was someone to manage, not love. I texted Evan without thinking, thumbs stiff with a cold that had nothing to do with the air. Was that card a joke? 3 dots. They blinked. Then vanished. A minute later, Naomi picked it. That was it. Not I didn't mean it that way. Not sorry if it upset you. Just, Naomi picked it. Like he was passing off a package he didn't bother to wrap. I put the phone down gently on the coffee table. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet above the stove, and pulled out the wine. I didn't bother with a glass. It was 11:12 a.m. I took the first sip standing at the sink, staring out at the yard, at the maple tree Evan used to climb when he was 7. He'd fall out of it every other week. Once he broke his wrist, cried all the way to urgent care. I hadn't thought about that in years. Somewhere along the way, my children had grown into strangers. Smart, careful, emotionally efficient strangers. Naomi curated things. Evan vanished, then sent cryptic cards. And I stayed here, in the house with their growth charts still penciled on the wall of the laundry room. I took another sip. It tasted like nothing. Back in the living room, I sat down slowly, the wine bottle balanced on my thigh. The card stared at me from across the room. I should have thrown it out. I should have laughed. But it stuck to me, like some old glue on the skin you can't scrub off. I reached for my phone again, thumb hovering. I wanted to call Naomi. Not to yell, not even to ask why she let that card go out with my name on it. I just wanted to hear her voice. Really hear it. Not that message tone she used when she was managing me from afar. But I didn't call. Instead, I opened our old family group chat. The last message was from Thanksgiving 2 years ago. A photo of Naomi's roast chicken, slightly overdone. Evan had liked it. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. No one ever came by unannounced. Not anymore. I set the bottle down and walked slowly to the door, heart in my throat. Not from excitement, but dread. I don't know why. I didn't even peek through the curtain. I just opened it. And there he was. Evan. Evan didn't hug me, just stood on the porch, hands stuffed into the pockets of a coat I didn't recognize. His eyes flicked past me, into the house, like he was checking for damage. "Just passing through," he said. "Thought I'd drop the card myself." I nodded, like that explained everything. I didn't ask why he didn't knock. I didn't ask why the card said what it did. I just stepped aside and let him in, but he didn't come in. He shook his head slightly, like the door frame was enough contact for one day. Anyway, I've got to be somewhere. And then he was gone. I didn't call out after him. I just closed the door and stood there, staring at the lock, wondering how many times I'd turned it behind him when he was small. First day of kindergarten. That night he came home with a busted lip and said it was his fault, that he'd made the bigger kid mad. I'd iced his mouth while stirring pasta with the other hand. No one applauded. There was no card for that. I picked up the wine bottle again, then put it down. Instead, I reached for the landline, the one with the coiled cord that still stretched from the wall like a lifeline to another time. I dialed Ellen without thinking. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Val!" My voice cracked before I even said hello. "I think I'm being erased." Silence. Then gentle. "Tell me everything." I did. Not in order, not in full sentences. Just fragments. The card, the text, the look on Evan's face. She didn't interrupt. Just let me speak until I was spent. "You need real food," she said, "and a human voice in the same room. Come over. I'll cook." I hesitated. I didn't want to cry in her kitchen, but I couldn't sit in mine a second longer. "I'll be there in 20, I said. The drive was muscle memory. Right on Sycamore, left past the church where Naomi used to sing in the youth choir. The streets looked the same, but smaller somehow, like everything had shrunk while I was busy making lunches and chasing bedtimes. I wasn't even thinking when I turned onto Washington Avenue and passed it. Evan's old school. The playground was different now. The metal slide was gone. The black top had fresh paint. But I could still see him there. 5 years old, jacket unzipped, knees skinned from recess, running toward me with a crumpled art project and a juice box smile. I pulled over and parked. I didn't cry. I just sat. How many mornings had I packed his lunch while checking a work email? How many nights had I listened to him read while folding laundry? All of it invisible, all of it expected. Now it lived nowhere. Not in his memory, not in his voice, certainly not in that card. My fingers were white-knuckled on the steering wheel before I realized I hadn't moved in 10 minutes. Ellen's house smelled like garlic and something warm when I walked in. She pulled me into a quick hug, then went right back to the stove, like she knew I didn't want to talk yet. She handed me a glass of water, not wine. "Sit, eat." I didn't touch the food right away. I just sat at the counter and stared at the table, letting the warmth fill the silence. When I finally spoke, it all spilled out, sharper this time, like I was carving the story into something solid. I was everything for him. I gave up job interviews to pick him up from aftercare. I skipped meals. I worked double shifts, and he still had Halloween costumes and birthday cakes and parent-teacher conferences. All of it. Me. And now he shows up, says nothing, and walks away like I'm just some lady. I stopped. Blinked hard. The tears didn't fall, but they were close. Ellen didn't flinch. She didn't try to smooth it over or tell me he'd come around. She just set a dish towel down, leaned on the counter, and looked at me like I was still worth looking at. He doesn't get to unmother you just because he grew up. That was it. Something in my chest cracked open, not enough to collapse, just enough to breathe again. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text. From Naomi. 3 words. Don't talk yet. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling while the hallway clock ticked off another hour I wouldn't get back. Naomi's text, don't talk yet, had done something to me. Not anger, not even confusion. Just this low, constant ache, like a bruise forming behind the ribs. By morning, I'd made a decision. Small, stupid maybe, but it felt like the only agency I had left. I stopped at the bookstore near the hardware shop and picked up The Paper Garden, the one Maggie had once pointed at in a window and called The Flower Book. She was 7. Thought I wasn't listening. I was. I wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with a ribbon from a drawer that still had Naomi's ballet hairpins in it. Then I drove again. Same roads, same turns, same heaviness. When Naomi opened the door, she looked like someone answering an unexpected delivery. "Oh, you didn't say you were coming." I offered a smile I couldn't feel. "Just dropping something off for Maggie." Evan appeared behind her, hoodie sleeves pushed up to his elbows, holding a cereal bowl. "Hey, Ma." He leaned in, gave me a one-armed hug that barely touched my shoulder. I caught the smell of burnt toast and citrus body wash. It smelled like him, but farther away. And then, footsteps. Maggie tore through the hallway in socks that skidded on the wood floors. "Grandma!" she shouted, arms already open. I caught her mid-jump. The book bagged softly against her back. For 1 second, just one, the ache in my chest eased. She was warm, real, and impossibly present. "I brought you something," I whispered into her hair. Naomi cleared her throat gently. "We're actually keeping it low-key this year," she said. "No big meal, no company, just a quiet night in." Her voice wasn't cruel, just curated, practiced. I nodded and placed the wrapped book in Maggie's hands. "You didn't have to do that," Naomi added, voice lighter now, performative. "I know," I said. "I wanted to." Maggie tore the paper open and gasped. "It's the flower book." Naomi gave a tight smile. "Oh, you remembered." I looked at her. I always do. No one said anything for a second too long. "Well," Naomi finally said, stepping back slightly. "Thanks for stopping by. I'm sure you're busy too." That was it. No seat offered. No table set for one more. "I should get going," I said quickly, folding my hands to stop them from shaking. Just wanted to see her face. Evan didn't stop me. Maggie hugged my legs once more, then bounded back toward the den. Naomi said something about bath time. I couldn't hear it. I walked myself to the door. Halfway down the hall, I passed the linen closet. Slightly ajar. Something caught my eye. Gold foil. A pattern I knew. I paused, turned my head. There it was. The hand-painted scarf I'd brought Naomi last Christmas, still wrapped, tucked on top of a pile of games and mismatched winter gloves. I'd spent hours finding that scarf. Had it shipped from a woman in Asheville who dyed silk in her garage. I blinked slowly, then pulled the front door shut behind me with more care than it deserved. Back in the car, I didn't turn the engine over right away. Just sat, letting the silence settle like dust on my skin. I looked at my hands. They didn't feel like they belonged to anyone's mother anymore. For a second, I imagined myself knocking again, asking why, pointing to the scarf, saying something that would crack whatever spell had frozen my children into such immaculate distance. But I didn't. Instead, I drove 2 blocks, then pulled over beside the elementary school again. The black top shimmered under the spring sun, empty now. I watched a squirrel dart across the fence line and disappear. The phone buzzed in the seat beside me. A message. From Ellen. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, at the woman who'd once held fevers and scraped knees and report cards like they were the spine of her identity. Now, I wasn't even the guest of honor. Just the guest. That night, I couldn't stop scrolling. Naomi's profile was still public. I hadn't looked in months, not since Maggie's birthday post, where I'd been tagged in a group shot and labeled Mom, like I was a prop instead of a person. Now there were dozens more. Photos from Easter, the backyard egg hunt, Maggie in bunny ears, Evan leaning against the porch railing with a beer and a half smile. Naomi had captioned it, "Family is everything." The kind of sentence that looks warm until you see who's not in the picture. I clicked through. Slide after slide of curated domestic life, matching sweaters, board game nights, Sunday hikes. I wasn't in a single one, not even the edges. Even at the few events I knew I'd been at, Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Maggie's first piano recital, I was absent, cropped out, or maybe never captured in the first place. I zoomed in on one. There was Naomi, arm around Maggie, and just at the edge of the frame, a blur of fabric that might have been my coat sleeve. It looked like a stranger had walked into the shot by accident. I used to be his whole world. That thought landed harder than I expected. Not, I used to matter. Not, I used to be important. But I used to be the son everything else revolved around. I timed his meals, his naps, his spelling tests. I memorized his classmates' names so I could ask about them at dinner. I stayed up when he was sick, told stories during power outages, picked him up early when a substitute made him anxious. And now he barely looked me in the eye. I closed the app and let the phone fall face down beside me on the bed. The silence crept back in. A minute later, it rang. Ellen. "I know you're not okay," she said. "You don't have to pretend." "I'm not pretending," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. There was a pause. I could hear her flipping something on the stove. Write him a letter. What? A real one. Pen and paper. Not a text, not a guilt trip. Just tell him who you are, who you were, what you remember, what you miss. I let the silence stretch between us. "You think he'd even read it?" I finally asked. "I think that's not the point." I wanted to hang up, or cry, or drive somewhere that didn't smell like everything I'd already lost. Instead, I said, "Thanks," and hung up first. The letter stayed in my mind the rest of the day. I imagined sitting at the kitchen table, yellow pad in front of me, writing about the Halloween when Evan dressed as a robot and cried because he couldn't sit down in his costume. I imagined telling him about how I saved his crayon drawings in a fireproof box, about the lullaby I used to hum when he had growing pains, but I didn't pick up a pen. Instead, I called him. It rang longer than it should have. Then, "Hey, I've got like 5 minutes. Can we make this quick?" I swallowed. "Sure." The silence on my end wasn't casual. I knew it, and he knew it. He didn't fill it. "I wanted to ask you something," I said. "Okay." My voice didn't shake, but it felt brittle. like something that might snap if I leaned on it too hard. "Do you even want me around anymore?" The question sat there. A pulse. A dare. He didn't answer right away. I could hear background noise, someone talking, a microwave beeping, maybe the clink of dishes being stacked. Then finally, "That's a complicated question." Ellen called mid-morning. Her voice was lighter than usual, almost distracted. "Hey, this is probably nothing," she said. "But I found something in the junk drawer, meant to toss it, but it's got your name on it." I almost didn't ask, but something in her tone held me. "What kind of something?" "A letter. From Naomi. Postmarked last fall." My mouth went dry. "What does it say?" "I haven't opened it." "Thought you should." She paused, then added quietly, "The envelope looked like it had been opened before. Maybe resealed. I don't know." By the time I got to Ellen's, the kettle was already steaming. She handed me the envelope without comment. It was off-white, the kind of stationery Naomi always used, clean, impersonal. My name was printed in her unmistakable hand, but the ink was faint, like it had been handled too many times. I turned it over. The flap had been sliced open, not torn. Carefully cut, like someone didn't want to leave a mark. I slipped the letter out. Ellen stayed quiet. Even the clinking of her spoon in the tea mug stopped. The letter was typed. "Dear Mom, I'm writing this because I think clarity is healthier than avoidance. I've felt for a long time that our relationship operates under unspoken assumptions that are no longer sustainable. For me, for Evan, or for Maggie. Please understand that this is not meant to hurt you. We simply need more space. That means not expecting invitations to every holiday. That means fewer drop-ins. That means shifting expectations of what family looks like as our daughter grows up. We are establishing boundaries, and we hope you can respect them, even if you disagree. We are not cutting you off. We are creating room to breathe." Naomi, I stared at the words. The tone was clinical, the kind of language you'd use to break up with a vendor, not a mother. "You've never seen that before?" Ellen asked gently. "No." It came out hoarse. I looked at the postmark again. November, 2 weeks after Maggie's birthday. Right before Thanksgiving, the one I'd spent alone because Naomi said they were going to the lake this year. I folded the letter once, then unfolded it. My fingers shook. Why now? Why send this and never say a word about it? Ellen tilted her head. You sure she never brought it up? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She hadn't. And then it hit me. Evan, I sold the piano, gave away the china, listed the antique mirror Ellen said made me look like I was fading. I wasn't fading. I was molting. It was Ellen who handed me the pamphlet, folded and creased like it had lived in her purse for months, waiting for the right moment. Found this in the co-op bulletin board, she said. It's weird and dusty, but I think you'd like it. 6 weeks, desert silence, studio access included, a women's retreat in northern New Mexico, painting, writing, movement, no Wi-Fi. I signed up the next day. I didn't ask permission. I didn't say anything to Evan or Naomi. I left a note with Ellen, tucked into her mailbox with a key and 2 emergency contacts. I'm not running. I'm choosing. Please feed the spider plant once a week. If it dies, don't replace it. Love, V. I packed lightly. Jeans, cotton dresses, 1 pair of earrings, a blank sketchbook I'd never dared open. The drive was long and sun-drenched. I didn't listen to music. I didn't check the news. And for the first time in years, I didn't think about Evan. Not once. Not how he held Maggie like cargo. Not the cease contact letter. Not the call he never made after. I thought about myself, that first stretch of highway past Amarillo where the fields opened wide like breath. The diner where a woman in her 70s told me she loved my hair and meant it. The roadside motel where I danced barefoot in a room that smelled like orange cleaner and cheap linen. When I arrived at the retreat, there were 7 of us, all women, all a little older, all a little bruised, a former midwife, a widow who used to race stock cars, a sculptor who hadn't made anything in a decade because her son thought it was just a phase. No one asked why I came. They just made room for me. On the second night, we sat outside under a sky so wide it felt like an answer. Someone passed around mugs of tea that tasted like cinnamon and ash. We didn't talk about men or children or the parts of us that had been rejected. We talked about color, about red that doesn't apologize, about soft lines that don't have to mean softness, about making things without needing to be thanked for them. When I told them I used to draw when I was younger, they didn't say, "You should start again." They said, "Where's your sketchbook?" And just like that, I wasn't someone's mother. I wasn't someone's mistake. I was seen. The message came in the 3rd week of the retreat. Short, blunt, no punctuation. You set the terms, I honored them. No hi, no apology, no warmth. Just lowercase accountability, or something wearing its clothes. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering. A week ago, that line might have cracked something open in me, might have made me believe there was a way back to something like closeness. But now it read like performance, like a man rehearsing virtue, not truth. I typed back, "No, Evan. You set the terms. I just finally stopped pretending they were mine." I didn't wait for a response. I powered down the phone and tucked it into the bottom of my backpack, under my sketchbook, my reading glasses, and a half-eaten granola bar. I didn't want the ping that might come. Or worse, the silence that might not. That afternoon, I stayed in the studio long after the others had gone to dinner. I worked in charcoal, tracing the outline of a cracked bird bath I'd seen that morning by the gravel path. It was overgrown with desert weeds, jagged around the rim, but it had held water once, probably more than it was ever meant to. Something in its stubborn shape made me ache. It looked like something that had been useful, then discarded, but still standing. The next message came 6 days later. Longer this time. Unedited. Not Naomi's voice. Evan's. Unsure and unraveling. Punctuated like someone typing between gulps of something he didn't want to feel. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought silence would be safer. I didn't want a war, so I just kept shrinking. Naomi didn't make me choose, but she made it clear I didn't get to be neutral. And I let her. I let her talk over you and call it calm. I let her file that thing. I didn't even know how far it would go. But now Maggie's asking. She remembers. She always remembers, would you ever see her? Just once. Just once. Just once. Like I was an errand. A one-time fix for a question Maggie wouldn't stop asking. Like I could step back into the life they'd erased me from, smile for the photo, and disappear again without incident. I didn't respond. Instead, I took the long walk out past the edge of the retreat, where the trail dropped into a dry arroyo. I sat on a rock that still held the day's heat and closed my eyes. The desert didn't ask me to explain myself. It didn't need me to be tidy. It just held me. A jackrabbit darted through the brush, then stilled. I pressed my palm into the dirt beside me, fingers splaying against the dry surface like I might leave a mark that would last past morning. That night, I sat on my bunk in the small adobe room and opened my phone again. I read the message 3 more times. He wanted a yes, not for reconciliation, for relief. So he could tell himself he tried, that he'd done the right thing, that if I said no, it would be me doing the abandoning, not him. I opened a reply window. You don't book time with love, Evan. You protect it. You teach your daughter that love doesn't shrink when it's hard, that it doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient, that it shows up, even when no one's clapping, even when it's not just once. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. I hit send. Then I turned off the phone and placed it face down on the dresser. Outside, the other women were gathering by the fire pit. Laughter rose, layered and real. That kind of laughter that carries weight because it comes from people who've been quiet too long. Someone was playing a guitar. Someone else read a poem aloud in a slow, cracked voice. And this too is a kind of returning. I stepped outside and walked toward the sound, barefoot, steady, not as someone's mother, not as someone's grief, but as someone choosing, finally, to be whole. He chose the park. Neutral ground. Open air. Public enough that neither of us could fall apart too loudly. It was early, still cool enough that the grass held a wet sheen. I saw him before he saw me, sitting on the bench by the sycamores, elbows resting on his knees like he was holding something heavy in his gut. He stood when I approached, but didn't reach for a hug. Good. I wasn't sure I could have given one without breaking the shape I'd worked so hard to hold. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice low. I sat without answering. The bench was damp and uneven, like it didn't want to hold this conversation either. He cleared his throat, stared straight ahead. "I didn't think it would get this bad," he said. "I kept thinking if I just stayed quiet, it would level out." I said nothing. "You were always there. I thought that meant you'd always be there. I didn't think I had to protect that. I let Naomi do what she needed to feel in control, and I convinced myself that was love. Now I turned to him. That wasn't love," I said quietly. "That was compliance." He nodded, jaw tight. "I thought I was being mature, choosing peace." "You weren't choosing peace. You were choosing the path of least resistance." That landed. I saw it in the way his shoulders dropped. He looked down at his hands. "I let her file that letter. I didn't stop her. I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. And then when she did, I didn't know how to backpedal without making it worse." I turned back toward the trees. "She used the word disruptive," I said, "as if I stormed through your lives with a bullhorn, as if I didn't knit that entire childhood together with whatever thread I could find." He didn't argue. Just let the silence stretch. After a minute, he said, "You said something once, in your message, about love showing up even when no one's clapping." I nodded. "I think I stopped showing up. Not just for you, for everyone." I kept telling myself I was managing it, that I was being measured, and all I was really doing was disappearing. I looked at him now. Really looked. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were puffy. He looked older than I remembered, like the weight of pretending had finally started to show. "You confused boundaries with abandonment," I said softly. "That broke something." He blinked, fast and hard, but didn't look away. "I don't know how to undo what I did," he said, "or didn't do, but I want to try." We sat in silence then, not the defensive kind, the kind that had room in it, the kind that let things breathe. Birds rustled above us. A dog barked across the park. The bench creaked under our shared weight. It felt like years of damage were sitting between us, still raw, still unanswered, but no longer denied. Finally, Evan turned to me. "What do I have to do?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the version of him that let Naomi write me out like a footnote. The version that stood on my porch and couldn't meet my eyes. The version that treated my grief like an inconvenience instead of a wound. Then I thought about the version sitting next to me now. Not fully changed, but cracked open maybe. Finally porous. "You want a list?" I said. "If that's what it takes." I exhaled slowly. "Be your own man," I said. "Then come back." He looked confused at first, but I didn't explain. I wasn't going to spell it out. He had to figure out what that meant. What it looked like to make choices that weren't curated by Naomi's anxiety or masked by performance. What it meant to defend someone, not because they needed protection, but because love demands a spine. He sat back, hands folded, nodded once. Then he stood. "Okay," he said. "I will." And he walked away. No hug, no closing line, no promise, just a beginning he'd have to earn. The message came on a Wednesday morning, just after I'd returned from the co-op with 2 bags of oranges and a bottle of mineral water I'd bought on impulse. It was waiting on my phone like a stone in the middle of the hallway. "I hope you're happy you broke your family." No greeting, no punctuation, no Maggie. Just 10 words, jagged and precise. A final blow from a woman who had spent the last year treating absence like a boundary and silence like a virtue. I stared at the screen, not because I didn't see it coming, but because I had. Because the inevitability of it made it sting less and ache more. Naomi hadn't changed. She'd just learned how to weaponize calm. This was her version of rage, quiet, typed, unacknowledged by anyone but me. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words. I had entire essays, pages of unsent letters and conversations I'd rehearsed in the shower and in the car, and during sleepless nights where I imagined myself saying just the right thing that would crack her shell wide open. But Naomi didn't want dialogue. She wanted to win. So instead, I pressed down on her name, scrolled through the options, and tapped block this caller. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean, like dusting the top of a shelf no one else would ever bother to look at but me. Later that night, Evan texted. A photo of Maggie, her hair wild and unbrushed, wearing one of his old t-shirts as pajamas. She was holding a bowl of oatmeal like it was treasure. A missing front tooth grinned back at me. She asked if she can see you this weekend, just you and her, if that's okay. It was more than okay. We started slow. One Saturday, then another. A walk in the botanical garden, where she counted butterflies like they were stars. We sat on the same bench each time, shared lemon ice, drew in a little sketch pad I carried in my purse. She'd draw a shape, a half circle, a squiggle, and I'd turn it into something else. A rabbit, a rocket. A raccoon in roller skates. We called it the flip book. She never asked about Naomi. I never brought her up. Evan stayed out of the way, dropped her off, picked her up. Never lingered unless Maggie insisted, which she sometimes did, narrating our 2-hour adventure like it was breaking news, and he was her only audience. It was 3 weeks in before he came early. Maggie was still finishing her drawing, a cat wearing sunglasses. He stood just inside the door watching us. "Hey," he said quietly. I looked up. "Hey." He paused. Then, "I just wanted to say thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not making me pay for everything at once," he said. "For letting me earn it back in pieces." I didn't respond right away. There was a time I would have pushed it away, made a joke, turned the moment into something easier. But not now. You want to rebuild something? I said. You start with one honest plank, then another, then another. You don't demand the roof before you've earned the floor. He nodded, folding his hands like he didn't know what to do with them. I'm trying. I know, I said. So is she. He smiled then, not big, but real. Then he bent down to help Maggie put her shoes on. She looked up at him and said, I think Grandma should come to my school art show. He didn't flinch. We'll talk about it, he said. And I knew he meant it. That night, I opened the folder with the will again. It was already updated. The house in trust for Maggie, Evan removed as executor, assets reassigned with clean lines and sharper boundaries. But I added one more sentence, above the signature, in ink. To those who chose me, I give everything. I didn't name names. They'd know who they were. And if they didn't, they hadn't chosen me. The frames came down one by one. Not with ceremony, just quiet precision. A small screwdriver, a steady hand. The click of glass separating from the past. I started in the hallway, where the old photos had hung too long. Half-cropped group shots, stiff smiles, celebrations edited down to clean angles. There was one from Maggie's second birthday. Naomi had uploaded it to social media with a filter so soft it looked like we were ghosts. I'd printed it out, thinking it was all I'd get. Now, I held it up to the light and realized I wasn't even in the frame. Just the corner of my shoulder, the shadow of my hand on the cake. That came down first, then the others, one after another. I didn't shred them. I didn't burn them. I placed each one gently into a manila envelope, sealed it, and wrote on the front in small, clear letters, not gone, just no longer pretending. Then I opened my laptop and started again. This time, I printed photos that showed the whole face, the full laugh, the truth. Maggie on the porch in my sweatshirt, spinning. Evan tying her shoe, his head bent like an apology. Me, no filter, no crop, holding a sunflower she picked from the yard. My eyes crinkled, my mouth mid-laugh. No one looking for the camera. No one performing for a future audience that never applauded. I framed those. When I hung them, the walls didn't feel reclaimed. They felt reborn. The house had gotten smaller over the past year, not physically, but in the way a place shrinks when people stop filling it. I'd cleared out so much. Furniture, dead plants, the stack of unread parenting books from the 90s, but now the emptiness wasn't absence. It was air. Ellen came by that afternoon with lemon scones and a cardigan she swore I'd left in her back seat 3 years ago. I didn't correct her. We drank tea by the kitchen window in a silence that didn't demand anything. She looked at the new photos, nodded once, and said, "That's better." I poured us more tea. We didn't say the names we were thinking. Didn't discuss the message Naomi had sent or the way Evan had started showing up without needing to ask. We didn't touch the grief, not because we were avoiding it, but because we'd made peace with its edges. We knew what it was. We'd named it already. Outside, the clouds moved like breath across the sky. Later, after Ellen had left and the light had gone soft, I found an old voicemail from Mike, my late husband, my once partner in all of this before illness took the last of his sentences. It was short. He was calling from the grocery store. There was static, and he mispronounced the name of the oat milk Naomi liked, then said, "Never mind. I'll bring both." He laughed at himself, then added, "Love you. Hope the dryer didn't eat another sock." I'd saved it years ago without thinking. Now it made me laugh. An actual laugh, full-throated and surprised. And then I smiled. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't need him to come back for me to keep going. From the kitchen, I heard a sound, small, rhythmic. Maggie, sitting on the floor in front of the cabinets, crayons scattered around her like candy. She was humming, legs crossed, coloring a picture of a fox in a rocket ship. Her hair was in a braid, messy, half loose, and she'd taken off her socks even though the floor was cold. I didn't tell her to put them back on. Instead, I sat on the floor beside her, not hovering, not correcting, just near. She didn't look up, just handed me a green crayon and pointed to the stars on the page. "These need color," she said. I filled one in slowly. Outside, the wind picked up. A picture frame shifted slightly on the wall, then stilled. I didn't flinch. No more ghosts here, just light, breath, and presence. No more photos missing faces. Some pains don't fade. They just stop needing to be named. That was the thought I carried with me through the garden as late summer turned toward fall. The hydrangeas had browned at the edges. The rosemary stretched longer than it should. I let it. Everything had the right to overgrow, to sprawl beyond its original border. Even me. I'd stopped measuring time in holidays, stopped circling dates that might never matter again. What I remembered now were moments, small, precise. Maggie's humming in the kitchen, the warm scratch of Ellen's laugh, the click of the mailbox when something real arrived instead of noise. I'd built something here, not a life as they'd once defined it, roles, favors, titles, but a place, a shape I could move inside without apology. Most of the room still felt lighter, less filled. I liked it that way. The desk by the window had a drawer just for letters, not the kind you mail, the kind you leave behind. I sat there now, the sun moving slow across the wood grain. A fresh envelope, my cleanest pen. I wrote, "Maggie, if you're reading this, it means you're 18, grown in all the ways that matter and probably some that don't. I hope you still draw. I hope you still question things. I hope no one ever makes you feel like you have to shrink to be loved. You come from people who forgot how to speak truth sometimes, who mistook silence for peace and boundaries for rejection. I was one of them. Maybe you will be too at times. But listen to me when I say, you are not what they make of you. You are what you keep choosing to be, over and over again. Never forget your voice. Even if people try to write you out of your own story, especially then. Love you, always. Grandma V." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope marked for Maggie on her 18th. No instructions, no pressure. Just a thread to find her way back to me if she ever wanted it. The garden was golden when I stepped outside. One of those evenings where the sun hits the fence like stained glass. I walked the gravel path in my slippers, ran my hand along the lavender bush that never quite died, even when winter said it should have. Resilient things aren't always loud about it. At the mailbox, I wasn't expecting anything, but inside, a card. No postmark, just my name, Valerie, in handwriting I hadn't seen since before all of this went sideways. I opened it with steady fingers, not braced, not afraid. It was simple, store-bought, no glitter, no clever slogan, just one line, handwritten in Evan's unmistakable scrawl. "Thanks for everything, Mom." And below that, "Love, Evan." That was all. No long apology, no justification. Just a real card, a real name, a real signature. It didn't undo everything, and it didn't have to. Not anymore. I stood there a long time, letting the light fall around me. It had taken so long to understand that healing wasn't about getting back what was lost. It was about choosing what to carry forward, what to plant again, what to finally set down. I slipped the card into my pocket, not for safekeeping, for company. As I turned to head inside, the wind picked up, soft, not sharp, and carried the scent of sage and soil. Something living, something real. And I thought, not for the first time, but maybe for the truest. Turns out DNA was the least of what I gave.